morning. I hope that the screen is visible. Today we are going to start database system architecture. Typically, a database system is partitioned into various modules, and those modules actually deal with one another to carry out the responsibilities of the overall database system. So we may pictorially look at our database system structure like this. So you might be visualizing various components in our database system structure. There are two functional components of database management system. The first is known as the storage manager, and the second one is the query processor. In fact, you are having, apart from these two functional components, storage manager and query processor, you might see here some other components as well. So today we are going to discuss about this database system architecture. So let us begin with the storage manager. So why this storage manager is really important for the database management system? The database systems typically require a large amount of storage space. The database management systems are meant for the corporates or the enterprises, and to store the data of the entire enterprise or a corporate, there is a need to have huge storage space. If I give you one example, say for example, corporate databases may range in size from the size of the database from hundreds of gigabytes to the terabytes even. So you might be knowing a gigabyte of storage is approximately 1000 megabytes. Actually 10 to 24 megabytes, right? Whereas if you consider a terabyte, it is in terms of 1 million megabytes. 1 million megabytes. So a gigabyte is of the order 1000 megabytes, whereas 1 terabyte is of the order 1 million megabytes. So there is, or if we consider a corporate database or database related to some enterprise, it is in terms of hundreds of gigabytes or even the terabytes. So huge amount of data needs to be stored, and that is why huge amount of storage space is required. If we consider our computer system, right, then you might be knowing that the main memory of the computer system is limited. The main memory of our computer system, sometimes we call it as random access memory, RAM. You might be knowing that the capacity of RAM or main memory is limited, whereas this huge amount of data related to a particular enterprise is being stored in the disk. And you might have learned in operating system somewhere that if we want to read the information that is stored in the disk, these are called as read or write operations, okay, with respect to the disk storage. These are called as the I/O operations, input-output operations. And if we talk about the input-output operations, those are required to read the data from the disk or to write the data into the disk. These operations are really very expensive. So if we compare the speed of our central processing unit and the speed of the I/O operations. Then the I/O operations are relatively very slow with compared to the speed of CPU. And that is why we need to have some kind of mechanism to cope up with this difference in the speed. And typically, it is not at all possible to store all the data required in our main memory. So the data needs to be stored in the disk. But whenever required, we need to read that data, or whenever required, we need to write that data into the disk. And the database system should ensure that efficiently this I/O operations are performed, or efficiently it is possible to read from the disk and also to write into the disk. And that is why some mechanisms are really required. And such kinds of functionalities or such kinds of operations are being performed by this storage manager. Also, we are having the query processor. The role of this query processor and why it is important, why we are having this functional component query processor. See, we are having the application programs. Okay, the application programs are actually written in some programming language. We are having some mechanism, we are having some high-level language wherein we are writing the code, wherein we are writing the program. And we are trying to communicate with our database system by making use of structured query language. In our structured query language, we are having two components, DDL and DML. So DDL stands for data definition language and DML stands for data manipulation language. So SQL or structured query language comprises of these two components, right? So we are giving the instructions to our database management systems by making use of several constructs in DDL and DML. We have seen few such constructs like create table or the select statement to retrieve the data. So we are making use of, or our application is actually making use of such constructs to retrieve the information or to access the information. Now, what is the role of query processor? Whatever actually is the instruction provided by our application program or by administrator, that instruction need to be communicated, and accordingly I want to perform the low level operations. So I may say that the instruction provided by making use of SQL is in high level. So we are using some constructs from the language to provide the statement. But to understand that statement or to understand whatever command that we have provided, we need to convert it, or the database system need to convert that SQL statement in some low level construct. And who is going to do that? In traditional programming languages also, you might be knowing that there are the interpreters or there are the compilers. There are the linkers. So similarly, here also in our database system architecture, to understand whatever is the statement written in SQL in the form of DDL or DML statement, that needs to be converted into some low level instructions, and that is the role of this query processor. So we are going to focus upon this query processor as well. So let's begin with the detailed discussion regarding the storage manager. So here is our storage manager. So what is the basic role of the storage manager? If you look at the position of the storage manager, where it is located, this storage manager is located in between the query processor and the disk storage. So at the bottom, whatever you are visualizing, it is my disk. So actual data is being stored in this disk, right? So the storage manager is actually providing me the interface between the low level data that is stored in the disk and the application programs and the queries. Those are submitted to the system. So as I mentioned, we are trying to communicate with our database management system through the various application programs, through various tools. And these application programs are actually making use of the queries. So ultimately, we are providing the queries. So the storage manager is actually providing us the interface between the low level data stored in the database and the application programs or the queries. Those are being submitted to the database system. Right? So now there are two important responsibilities associated with this storage manager. And what are those two important responsibilities? The storage manager is responsible for interaction with the file manager. So you may look at here, there is a component file manager. So the storage manager is responsible for interaction with the file manager. And also it is responsible for efficient storing, retrieving and updating of data into the disk storage. I'll repeat, two important responsibilities associated with storage manager. The storage manager actually translates the various DML statements into the low-level file system commands. The storage manager is responsible for storing, retrieving and updating the data into the database. So, as you can see here, four important components of this storage manager. So, what are those four important components? Those we can visualize here in this diagram. Those are comprising this storage manager. So we are having four components. What are those? We are having authorization and integrity manager. We are having transaction manager. We are having the file manager and we are having the buffer manager. So what are the roles of these different components? These four are actually comprising the storage manager. So all those are with certain responsibilities. So what is the responsibility of authorization and integrity manager? So as we have seen earlier, various different kinds of users are having different rights for accessing the database. Right? So this authorization and integrity manager is first checking whether the user who wants to access the data is authorized or not. I'll repeat. The data is stored in the disk. The users are using several functionalities to access this data stored in the disk. So users are being provided with certain rights to access the data. Say for example, we have seen earlier, if one of the user is student, then student has provided with certain rights. So my authorization and integrity manager is checking whether whoever is the user that wants to access the data, whether that user is authorized to access that kind of a data. So there is a check whether the user is authorized or not. So who is going to take care of this authorization? This authorization and integrity manager, which is one of the components of storage manager, is responsible to check that whether the person who is asking access for the data, whether that user is authorized or not. Further, this component is also responsible to check for the integrity constraints. So we have already talked earlier about the integrity constraints. So what are those integrity constraints? We have categorized those integrity constraints in 4 parts. So we are having domain constraints. Importantly, we are having referential integrity. So these are the constraints, integrity constraints. We are having the assertions. So this component is also responsible to check for the integrity constraints, whether those are violated or not. If those are violated, then this manager will take care of that. So the responsibility of this component is actually to check for violation of the integrity constraints. So I hope you must have understood this. So we talked about the very first component of storage manager, and that is authorization and integrity manager. So this component actually is responsible for checking whether the user is authorized and also whether any integrity constraint is being violated. So these 2 tasks are being performed by this authorization and integrity manager. The next component is the transaction manager. So what we mean by this transaction manager and what are the responsibilities of this component? So transaction manager actually ensures that the database remains always in a consistent state. I'll repeat. The most important responsibility of the transaction manager is to ensure that our database system always remains in consistent state. We had a little introduction to this concept earlier. So, what I mean by this consistency? Many times it may happen that our database system comes across some kind of a failure. Maybe it is a hardware failure, maybe it is a software failure or any kind of failure. It may happen that our database system is facing such kind of a failure. So despite any kind of failure, my database system always must ensure that the data stored in my system always remains in consistent state. Say for example, let us assume that we are having one transaction. We are undergoing one transaction. And what is that transaction? That transaction might be, suppose I am having say 2 departments in my university schema. So I am having say department A and department B.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, one of my friend is waiting in lobby. Can you please add?
There is nobody in the lobby and I have permitted access to all the students who are entering late. No one is there in the lobby. The person can directly admit the room. So, let me proceed. We are having two departments, say department A and department B. And we are having some budget associated with department A or every department. So department A is having some budget and department B is also having some budget. Now let us assume that there is one transaction, and what that transaction is, suppose some part of the budget needs to be transferred from department A to department B. Let us assume that budget of department A currently is, let us assume that it is 1 lakh. Okay, and budget of department B is suppose 50,000. Right? So budget of department A is 1 lakh rupees. And budget for department B is say 50,000. Now let us assume that some amount from A is being transferred to B. Let us assume that 20,000 is being transferred from A's account to B's account. Okay, so this is one transaction. So when we are saying that it is a one transaction, it is one logical unit of work. Transaction is one logical unit of work. So whenever we are transferring some amount from A's account to B's account, then what we expect is this transaction should be completed in its entirety. What I mean by that? If I have started performing the transaction, and let us assume that we are having certain steps in performing this transaction. So what will happen first? I want to transfer this 20,000 from A's account to B's account. So first thing, what will happen? 20,000 will be decremented from A's account. So it would be decremented from A's account and then it would be added into B's account. So I'm having debit from A's account and I'll be having credit to B's account. So these two operations actually are important. Decrementing A's amount and incrementing B's amount. So there are several steps in performing this transaction. Let us assume that suppose the amount 20,000 is decremented from A's account. But before it gets added to B's account, there is a failure of the system. I hope you are understanding the concept. I am having one transaction. That transaction wants to transfer some amount from A's account to B's account. So, in this transaction, there are two important steps. And these two important steps are, I need to decrement the amount from A's account and I need to increment the same amount in B's account. So, let us assume that the first operation is performed correctly. That means A's account gets decremented by 20,000. But there is a failure now and the 20,000 amount is not being deposited in B's account due to failure. Then what will happen? If there is a failure and if I am not able to complete my transaction, then if I am not taking care of such incomplete transaction, then obviously my database system will enter into inconsistent state. And I want to protect my database system from such kinds of inconsistencies. And that is why here is the role of this transaction manager. So my transaction manager always looks for important properties of the transaction, and those properties are known as the ACID properties. We are not going into the details of those properties, ACID properties. And what is this ACID? A stands for atomicity, C stands for consistency, I stands for isolation, and D stands for durability. I'll repeat. A stands for atomicity, C stands for consistency, I stands for isolation, and D stands for durability. So these are the ACID properties. So every transaction in my database system should follow ACID properties. And it is the responsibility of my transaction manager to check for these ACID properties, to check whether these properties are violated by any transaction. Also, it should take care of the concurrent access to my database. What I mean by concurrent access to the database? It may happen that simultaneously many users are using the same database. Many users are simultaneously making use of the same database. So once again, there is a possibility that my database system may enter into the inconsistent state. So we are having concurrency control manager also, and that is taking care of such kinds of concurrent operations. In fact, we are going to discuss all those concepts in this course. But with respect to this database system architecture, I am just introducing those concepts in brief. So we are having one of the components of our storage manager, and that is transaction manager. So what are the responsibilities of transaction manager? Actually, my transaction manager should take care of the ACID properties of the transaction. My transaction manager is also responsible to provide access to concurrent users or multiple users simultaneously, and my transaction manager should ensure that always my database system will remain in consistent state. So even though there is a failure, we need to ensure the atomicity of the transaction. That means in case of our example, either the transaction should be completed successfully, otherwise the transaction should be reverted. The transaction should not be considered in case of the failure, right? So this is called as atomicity property. So my transaction manager should ensure this atomicity property. That means every transaction should complete in its entirety, or nothing should be carried out as far as that failed transaction is considered. So I hope you must have understood these concepts. So this is what the responsibility of transaction manager and the concurrency control manager, which is the part of it. Next comes the file manager. So what is the role of file manager? In fact, the data is stored in this disk storage, okay, and actually the data is stored in terms of some file system, and that file system is provided by the operating system that we are using. So actually the data is stored in the form of files. We may have many number of files, or the database management system is using some complex data structures to store that data, to handle that data, right? Also, my database system is using the data dictionary, right, to store the metadata about the data. Also, to improve the performance of the database system, my database management system is making use of the indices. So indices are the mechanisms, those are being used to improve the performance of our database system. Say for example, if I want to search for something, I'll be using an appropriate index to expedite the task. So obviously, to associate it with those indices, I am having certain files. Those are also been stored in my disk storage. Okay. So as we are having lots of things, those are being stored in the form of some files in the disk storage. My database system need to manage the allocation of the space on disk storage. My database system need to manage the data structures. Those are being used to represent the information onto the disk. So who is going to take care of all this? The data, the index files, and its management, allocation of data onto the disk. So we are having this file manager who is actually responsible to manage all this data onto the disk storage. So what are the files? Where are the files located? What are the data structures? Right? So everything is being looked after by this file manager. Right? And the last component of the storage manager is the buffer manager. So what about this buffer manager? This buffer manager is actually responsible for fetching the data from disk storage into main memory. See, as I mentioned earlier, you might have learned this concept in operating systems. Just try to recollect back the concept of buffer manager from the operating system. Database systems, we are having the buffer managers and they are having the similar tasks that of the operating systems. You might have learned in operating systems the role of buffers or buffer managers. So as I mentioned earlier also, our main memory is having very low capacity and our actual data that is being stored in the disk is of huge capacity. So whenever we want to manipulate that data, it is not possible for us to accommodate entire data that is stored in my disk into the main memory. It is not possible for us to bring entire data into the main memory for further manipulations. And that is why what needs to be done is we need to appropriately bring the appropriate part of the data from the disk storage into the main memory. And who is responsible for this movement of the data from disk to the main memory? Here comes the role of buffer manager. So what is role of buffer manager? Whichever is the data that is asked by the application programmer, the buffer manager will see whether that data is available in my main memory. If it is not available in my main memory, then buffer manager will have or will call it from the disk storage, and that data is being made available to the user, right? So the movement of the data from disk storage to the main memory of the system, who is looking after this movement? The buffer manager. Also, buffer manager is taking the decision which data needs to be cached into the memory, which data is frequently being used, which data is not being used frequently, and accordingly the buffer manager takes the decision how to handle this data, right? And this is really very critical task that is being performed by the database management system as a whole, and the buffer manager is actually responsible for movement of this data. So I hope you must have understood what are the different components of data manager, storage manager, right? And what is the responsibility of each and every component of the storage manager. If you have any doubts, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to discuss the next functional component, and that is the query processor. If you have any doubts, please let me know. So let me proceed to query processor now. So in our database system architecture, we are having this functional component query processor. And the query processor actually comprises of several other components or subcomponents. So let us see three important subcomponents here, and these are the DDL interpreter, right? Then the DML compiler and the query evaluation engine. So as we know and as we discussed, see here at the top level, what we have here, we are having different kinds of users, and these users are making use of certain interfaces, maybe the application interface, maybe the application program, the query tools, those are being used by the sophisticated users or the analysts, right? The database administrator is having his or her own administration tools. So every kind of user is making use of appropriate interface. It may be application program, it may be application interface, GUI, forms, query tools, or the administration tools. And by making use of these interfaces, my users are actually interacting with the database system. So obviously, whichever tool they are using or whatever kind of interface they are using, right? Ultimately, those tools or interfaces or the application programs are making use of certain SQL constructs, and these SQL constructs are in the form of DDL statements or the DML statements. So we are having the DDL constructs, those are meaningful to create the schemas, and these DDL statements typically are being used by the database administrators, right, to create the database schemas. Next, the DML statements are being used by many different users, okay? But ultimately, what needs to be done? DDL or DML are the high-level constructs. These are the statements, these are the high-level constructs. And the statements written in DDL form or DML form, these statements cannot be interpreted, or these statements cannot directly be understood by the underlying database system. So what needs to be done is these statements need to to be converted into the low level structures, right? So what is role of this DDL interpreter? This DDL interpreter actually interprets the DDL statements, the statements written in data definition language, right? And these, after interpreting these DDL statements, right, the definitions of different tables in the system are being stored in my data dictionary, right? So DDL interpreter actually converts the DDL statements into some low level details, and after that, that has been understood by my database system, and then that is being stored in my data dictionary. Similarly, if I am having DML queries, then my DML queries are compiled and linked, right? So few of the users are using the application programs, right? So these application programs may have some DML constructs or DML queries. So these DML queries also need to be compiled, right? So we are having the compiler who is actually compiling the DML queries, and further these DML queries in the form of now some low level structures are being forwarded to this query evaluation engine. So sometimes it may happen that we want to extract some data from the database, and more than one SQL statements or select statements we may write to carry out or to perform the same task. It may happen. So if I want to extract some data from the database, it may happen that I am having several different constructs in SQL. And every construct, if I use, it will provide me the same result. But the way how the statement gets executed is different. So my query evaluation engine, what it does is, if I'm having several possible plans, to execute the query, those plans are evaluated by this query evaluation engine, and whichever plan is most optimal, that particular statement is picked up, and accordingly that is being forwarded to the lower level, and then accordingly the data is being extracted from the disk, right? So this query processor is typically having three components: DDL interpreter, DML compiler, and query evaluation engine. So DDL interpreter is actually interpreting the DDL statements, and further the definitions are being stored in data dictionary. DML compiler is actually interpreting the DML statements written in the form of some constructs, standard constructs. These are being converted into low-level details, and further these low-level details are being passed on to the query evaluation engine. So there are several plans, right, to extract the same data from the database. We are having number of ways to extract the data. So my query evaluation engine will execute the low-level instructions. Those are generated by my DML compiler and actually finds out the optimal way to extract the data and performs accordingly. So these are the tasks. Those are performed by this query processor. So I hope you must have understood the concept. If not, please let me know. So this is the overall structure of our database management system. So every database management system, whenever it has been designed, say for example, Oracle, it is a database management system. DB2, it is a database management system. MySQL, it is a database management system. So if we really would like to build such kind of database management system, then we need to take care of all such components while designing a database management system. So Oracle is having similar kind of database structure. DB2 is having similar kind of database structure or architecture rather. MySQL is having its own database system architecture. But the main components, those are required for designing a database management system, are the ones those we discussed so far. So I hope you must have understood. If you are having any doubts, please let me know.
Hello.
Any doubts?
Hello.
Yes.
Ma'am, will you tell me what is the use of query evaluation engine?
Yes. As I mentioned, if I want to extract the data stored in my database, there are several different ways to write the query. So I'm having many different constructs to write my select statement. Not necessarily there is only a single way of writing the query. There are several ways, right? So what my query evaluation engine will do, depending on the DML statement that we have provided, right? This DML statement first gets converted into some low-level instructions, because my underlying architecture is not aware of the DML construct. My underlying architecture of the database system is only knowing some low-level constructs. You may visualize this concept like your high-level programming language. Whenever, say for example, you are having a C program, so it is high-level programming language. So we write some statements in C program, okay? And what we do next, we compile our code. So what is the role of this compiler? Whatever we have written in high-level language, the compiler converts it into the low-level language. And then this low-level language code is being understood by my underlying hardware. And accordingly, I'll be getting the results. This similar concept we are using here in the database management system. So my DML constructs are written in something like high-level language. So first task is to convert those constructs into the low-level details, and that is the role of my DML compiler. So once I am having these low-level details, as I mentioned, there are several ways to extract that information. There are several ways, right? For example, if I give you one example, okay? So if you remember, in one of the classes, we have talked about how to write the query using select statement, right? We use the select statement to extract the data from our database, okay? Now, we wrote one statement. If you remember, please try to recollect. We wrote the statement to extract the information of the instructors, and our problem statement was find names of the instructor those belong to computer science department and having the salary greater than 60,000. If you remember, we had that problem statement. What we did? We wanted to extract the data related to names of the instructor, and we wanted to extract names of the instructors those belong to computer science department and also having the salary greater than 60,000. Okay, now we are having, if I want to write the query to extract this data, I am having several different constructs. Those will help me to extract this data. Say for example, right, I am writing the query like select instructor.names from instructor where department name equal to computer science and instructor.salary is greater than 60,000. If I am writing this query, while executing this query, I need to consider two conditions. And what are those two conditions? First condition, I want to extract the instructors from computer science department, and second condition says that I want to extract only those instructors for whom the salary is greater than 60,000. So I need to check two conditions, right? So while actually executing this query, I might have more than one plans. For example, first I'll be filtering out all the instructors from computer science department. So let us assume that I am having total 500 instructors. So first step would be filtering out the instructors only from computer science department. So out of those 500, I'll be having only say 25 instructors from computer science, right? So that is first part while executing the query, only extracting the instructors from computer science department. But I'm having one more condition. What that condition is? That condition is I want to have only those instructors. Those are having the salary greater than 60,000 out of those computer science people. So the next step is out of now those 25, I'll be imposing another condition and I'll be checking the condition whether the salary is greater than 60,000. Right? So this is one plan of execution. Another plan of execution would be like, say, first out of 500 instructors, first I'll be picking up all the instructors, those are having the salary greater than 60,000. Right? So in this situation, I may come up with say 200 instructors who are having the salary greater than 60,000. And then in the next step, I will impose the condition out of those 200 instructors. Now I want to check whether the department is computer science. Right? And then I'll be picking out the instructors belonging to computer science and having the salary greater than 60,000. So this is another plan. So in plan number 1, what I did, I first found out the people from computer science and then I imposed another condition greater than 60,000. In the second plan, what I did, I first found out the instructors having salary greater than 60,000 and secondly, I imposed the condition that department name should be computer science. Right? So these are two different plans for executing this query. Okay? Now, ultimately, both the plans are going to provide me the same result. The same result. No doubt. Both the plans are going to provide me the same result. But one of the plans out of these two is more optimal than the other one. For example, if I go with first approach, what will happen? In the first go, I am extracting only 25 people. And in the second time, I need to have comparison for salary only for these 25 people. But if I go with the second plan, what will happen? In the first step, I have extracted the data for 200 instructors. And in the second step, I'm going to compare now whether these 200 instructors are having computer science branch. So 200 comparisons I would like to have for the second step, right? In the second plan. So obviously, if I compare these two plans, I may say that the first plan is more efficient. Because in the second step of first plan, I need to have only 25 comparisons. Whereas in the second plan, I need to have 200 comparisons. Right? So this is how we may compare different plans. And the query evaluation engine is actually doing the same thing. If there are multiple ways to extract the data, whichever is the most efficient plan, that plan needs to be executed. Right? In this course, actually, we are not talking about query optimization. Right? But it was a good question, and I hope you must have understood whatever I explained. Still, if you have any doubts, please let me know. Yes.
Clear.
Whether it is clear? Okay, so may I proceed?
Yeah.
Fine. So,
Surely, ma'am.
okay, thank you. So let us go to the last concept that today we are going to discuss about, and that is a two-tier architecture and a three-tier architecture of database system. So if you are able to visualize the screen, we are having depicted here a two-tier architecture and a three-tier architecture of our database system. So what actually we mean by this two-tier architecture and this three-tier architecture? Most of the users of a database system, right, those are actually making use of database system remotely. So nowadays we are having the systems like those are distributed ones. So the users of the database system are distributed, or the users of the database system are not present at only one site of the database system, but they are connecting to the database system remotely through a network, right? And that is why we are having the concept like client and server. So we are having the client server systems. Okay, so you are visualizing here two such client server systems. One is known as the two-tier architecture and the other is known as a three-tier architecture.
Hello, ma'am. You are not audible.
So we are having the database system that is running at the server side, and the clients are using those applications. So they are requesting the server to provide them the functionalities or the details. So what is the difference actually in this two-tier network or two-tier architecture and the three-tier architecture? So let us see first what is two-tier architecture. So here we are having the two partitions. At the server side, if you look at this slide, at the server side, we are having the database system. And at the client side, we are having the user along with the application. So what we mean by that? The application actually resides at the client machine. I'll repeat. The application actually resides at the client machine and the user is making use of this application program that is residing at the client side, and through this application program which is deployed at the client side, the user is communicating, user is invoking the database system which is located at the server side. So in two-tier architecture, at the server side, only the database system is located, whereas the application program that is being used by the user is deployed at the client side. Okay? Are you getting me? So this application program actually is making use of the query language or the query language statements. So this application program is having the query language statements, and these statements are being passed through the network to the database system, right? And this application program interface is, or the application program interface standard, you might be aware of these words. Those are, say, JDBC and ODBC, right? So these are the interfaces, those are being used by these application programs, right, to interact with this database management system. So in a sense, in two-tier architecture, only the database system is located at the server and the application is deployed at the client side, and these application programs are making use of the interfaces like JDBC and ODBC to connect to the database system. So all the query language statements are available in this application program, and the user is interacting to the database system through this application program, and in turn application program is making use of the query statements, right? So this is how the two-tier architecture works. In three-tier architecture, we are having something different. Just look at it, what we have. At the server level, we are not having only the database system, but we are having the application server as well. So what we mean by that? So whatever is the business logic that is implemented at application server, I'll repeat, the business logic is being implemented at the application server. The database system is also located at the server side. Okay, and at the client side, what we have? At the client side, we are having the application client. So business logic is not being provided here. We need not deploy any client application program here. Instead, this user is typically making use of some kind of functionalities, right? So users here are present with available to the user through some browsers. Right? So business logic is not at all deployed at every client side. Please remember, the business logic is not deployed at every client side. The clients are interacting with the database system through application client, and this is typically a browser. So the browser, I'm making use of, or I'm thinking to the underlying database system that is available at the server. Also, at the server side, I am having the application server. So business logic is actually present at the server side and not at the client side. Right? The application server receives the requests through this browser or through this interface, application client, and whatever are the requests from the application client, those are database system. The result is being received by the application server, and then application server will resend the result to the application client. So this is the way how the three-tier architecture works. And these three-tier applications are more appropriate for some large enterprises, some building some large applications. Say for example, the web applications are making use of the three-tier architecture. Applications are making use of the three-tier architecture. So if I want to communicate with my bank website, what actually I am doing? I am using the application client. I do not have my application program at my place. Right? I am having simply the interface in the form of some utility or functionality provided by means of some forms. So I am browsing it using one browser, and I am browsing, right? I am submitting the requests to the application server, and the business logic is deployed at this application server and not at the client side. Please remember, that is the difference. Here in two-tier architecture, the application is being distributed to all the clients. So every client must install this application, right, at client side in two-tier architecture. Because at the remote side, at the server, we are having the database system. So in contrast with this two-tier architecture, in three-tier architecture, the application server is also located at the server side, right? And at the client side, we are not having any kind of application program as such. Only we are having few interfaces, and those will help me to communicate with the application server. So business logic is implemented at application server, and we are calling the functionalities from the application server. And in turn, this application server will interact with the database system, and whatever is our request, accordingly the data will be provided to us at the client. So this is how my three-tier architecture works. If you have any doubts, please let me know. If you have any doubt, please let me know. Otherwise, we are going to conclude this session.
No, ma'am.
So I hope you must have understood the concepts those we discussed in today's session. So with this, we are concluding part 1 of unit 1. In part 2, we are going to focus on ER model and how to draw the ER models or the ER diagrams for the real world applications. We are going to discuss all those details in part 2 of unit 1.